What French President Nicolas Sarkozy had to say. Reuters has this direct quote: "A new form of capitalism is needed based on values which put finance at the service of business and citizens, and not vice versa. And the system must be completely overhauled, an overhaul that must be global," Sarkozy told other EU leaders. British Prime Minister Gordon Brown joined his call for a summit and urged a rebuilding of International Monetary Fund. Let's see what Gordon Brown had to say.
The G8 has made a statement this evening, all countries agreeing to an international leaders meeting to discuss not only the current events but how we can reform the international financial system to give people confidence that the savings are secure, that all action necessary is being taken. So we've agreed to meet in the next few weeks. We've agreed also that we will work together beyond what we've done in the last few days, where we've had concerted action on liquidity, on getting funding into the system, on recapitalizing our banks by strengthening them with taking shares in them. And we've agreed also that at this meeting we will discuss detailed proposals that will reform the international financial system.
What is Gordon Brown talking about, Professor Foote? How would they want to reform the financial order of the world?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Well, you know, this goes back to 1944 with the original Bretton Woods. We had 44 allies who were capitalistic countries making an agreement. That was based on the gold standard. That was based upon fixed exchange rates. And it was also based on the assumption that we would treat all partners without discrimination. If we were even following that today, why are there sanctions against Iran, for example? Why are there threats of wars? All of this was expressly stated in Bretton Woods' 1944 original one, that that's not the way to behave. Until we define our goals, Bretton Woods emphasized the stability of exchange rates, whereas John Maynard Keynes was proposing an emphasis on economic growth throughout the world. What we really need to be worried about is economic growth throughout the world, with or without Keynes, and have a world buy-in and not just take care of a few stock markets in a small number of countries.
All right, well, let's see what Gordon Brown had to say. He also said, quote, "Today the dollar is the currency of Bretton Woods, but now it could be that there will be other combinations. The debate on foreign exchange is being reopened." Economy Minister Giulio Tremonti said, and the system, Sarkozy said, must be completely overhauled, an overhaul that must be global. Marco Pietropoli, now going back to 1944, Bretton Woods, what was wrong with that agreement? It collapsed in '73, and then the world went toward, let's say, floating exchange and floating currencies. But, again, we have a collapse. So what was wrong with that? What do we need now?
Well, I think in those days was a completely different world, and there needed to be a system to stabilize the world financial system after the Second World War. And what happened is that the US, being on the gold standard, found its currency to be extremely strong, and therefore found it difficult to therefore export and compete on that side of things. So therefore it moved away from the gold standards so that it could devalue its currency and make its exports more competitive. I think that going on what has been said so far, I think what we need to do is go back to the drawing board and actually look at what we're trying to achieve out of a new financial system. And I think that this idea that everything is based on particularly one currency perhaps will be seen as too risky moving forward, and maybe a basket of currency type of approach will be a far better way of doing it, because having everything based on the dollar like we have at present, you have extremely volatile commodity prices because of that, and that is a extreme risk. And also, especially if you're trying to safeguard value as a place of a safe haven for investors, again, the dollar doesn't seem necessarily to be that safe, and therefore a new approach needs to be devised.
Now, Professor Foote, let's take a look at dollar. Now, we have Gordon Brown, the British Prime Minister, taking his jab at the dollar. Back in 44, speaking of Bretton Woods, the United States, well, it had its dollar equaling gold. And then it says, well, dollar is as good as gold. Today, it's greenback again, but still, we're talking dollars pumped into the market to save things, and the British simply saying, no, the dollar empire is over. What's happened to the dollar over the years?
Well, as your previous speaker noted, we could even go back to England before that. Before it was the dollar, it was pound sterling. It's asking too much for the whole world to be depending upon the stability of the underlying economy of a single country. There were even discussions back in the old days about a single world currency, though I like your previous speaker's suggestion instead of a package of existing currencies instead. But the whole idea of gold is hotly debated to this day. The problem with gold was not everyone has gold, and some of those who have gold were not even at Bretton Woods. Russia is very rich in gold, for example, and was not a signatory. You can't have much of a system for benefiting the whole world if you don't have everyone present at the table.
All right. One person smiling can afford a smile here in this financial crisis. Let's go to AFP, and that is none other than U.S. President George W. Bush. Bush assures U.S. economy will rebound. President Bush reassured Americans on Saturday about the long-term health of the economy, insisting that the United States is still the best place in the world to start and run a business. In the long run, he said, quote, the American people can have confidence that our economy will bounce back. But how long, Marco, should Americans wait for this economy to rebound?
Well, it's going to be quite a wait. I think that there's a great amount that needs to be worked through. So far, really, we've had a significant downturn in the housing market. It's then developed into a financial crisis that has spread across the world. What we've got to look forward to in the short term is the impact of all of this on the real economy. But something that really hasn't been talked about at length, I think you did touch on this a little bit before, is where is all this money coming from to actually rescue the economy? The British, the Americans, and most of the European countries simply don't have the reserves. So therefore, this has to be worked through. Mr. Bernanke and Mr. Paulson are going to need to put their best suits on and come out and look at raising potentially trillions over the next year and a half, 2 years to keep the system liquid. They either get it or they don't. If they don't, they'll be printing money, and therefore the financial consequences of that is quite staggering.
Printing money